suggesting a level of instability that came as no surprise to anyone with experience in this world. The survey's authors added, industry churn was also reflected in the limited expectation among employees to remain with their current employers for the long term. Most respondents seemed to expect high job mobility. The following year, reporter James Batchelor at the website gamesindustry.biz counted up all the jobs lost to game studio closures from September 2017 through September 2018 and found that the number was over 1,000, and those were just the ones that had been made public. Working in games has always meant accepting that stable employment is the exception, not the rule. In exchange for the pleasure of creating art for a living, game developers have to accept that it might all fall apart without much notice. Sean McLaughlin, who has worked in video games since 2006, described it as a constant feeling of anxiety. With all the layoffs I've dealt with, I get a PTSD-type thing whenever there is an email for an all-hands meeting in an office, he told me in an email. I always think it's to announce a studio closure, even though it's just the team getting together and hearing about things going on around the studio. I'm sure it's a common thing among other developers. I also no longer put more things on my desk than I can carry out in one bag, McLaughlin added. When I first got in the industry, I would have the common toys and collectibles on my desk. Now my desk is barren and only has photos and a book or two in case I get laid off again. You might think, well, that sounds like any creative field. But unlike Hollywood, in which workers shift between contracts as movies weave in and out of production, the video game industry sells the illusion of full-time employment. Job listings for massive publishers like Take-Two and EA advertise careers, not gigs. Unless a developer is on a temporary contract, there's an expectation that when they're finished with their current game, they'll move on to the next one. Keeping people around for the long haul makes sense. The tools that each studio uses to make video games are unique and complicated. Once a developer has put in the time to learn those tools, they'll be more efficient than new recruits. Plus, the chemistry developed over years of working together can be invaluable, as anyone who's worked on a collaborative creative project or a group science experiment can attest. So why is it that the people making financial decisions in the video game industry don't seem to care? I had a long chat with veteran game designer Katie Chironis about this volatility. Chironis, who has worked for the gaming giants Microsoft, Oculus, and Riot, talks often about her fears of instability. She's been through one mass layoff and watched two others happen to coworkers. In 2018, she moved from Seattle to Los Angeles, choosing her new home city in part because it was full of other big game companies, in case she's laid off again. She and her husband, also a game developer, frequently talk about their contingency plans, brainstorming lists of companies that could be attractive destinations if their current gigs go awry. We orient our housing discussions around planning against likely layoff situations or having to move on if a project gets canceled, Chironis told me. The common wisdom is that you want to stay in a home for at least 5 years. We've never worked anywhere longer than 3. Chironis says the hardest part about working in the video game industry is developing friendships that might be ripped apart with no warning. One day in 2014, Chironis arrived to work at her mobile game studio and was suddenly told to pack up her things and go home. Until then, she had thought everything was fine. You just get pulled into an office and told to leave, and you're not even permitted to say goodbye to anybody, Chironis said. I couldn't come back to the studio. I had friends at the studio, or people I considered friends, and I had no way to contact them. Video games are designed to bring joy to people, yet they're created in the shadow of corporate ruthlessness. Why does such a lucrative industry treat its workers this way? Why is the video game business so successful at creating interesting art and making billions of dollars, yet such a failure at providing stable employment? When I set out to write my first book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, I wanted to know why video games are so hard to make. I asked a whole bunch of developers and got a whole bunch of answers. The short version, games straddle the line between art and science, where technological advancements and the challenge of finding the fun can make it near impossible to build accurate schedules. Whether you're developing an open-world role-playing game like Pillars of Eternity or a linear adventure game like Uncharted 4, there are so many variables that it can often feel, as the saying goes, like shooting a movie while simultaneously building the camera. With this book, I wanted to ask a different question. Why is it so hard to maintain job security in the video game industry? I wanted to know what it's like to work in a field where you might have to suddenly pack your things and move across the country without notice. I wanted to know why layoffs and studio shutdowns keep happening, how they impact people, and how those people recover. What's it like to start a game company only to watch it fall apart? What happens to a writer, an artist, a designer, a programmer, a sound engineer, a QA tester?